Throughout the movie industry, there have been a lot of films that have created controversy. But in the end, these films end up being groundbreaking classics that were made for a reason, especially when they touched on that one subject that mattered the most: reality. A wise man once said, "The truth is the hardest pill to swallow." And there is no harder pill to swallow nowadays than reality. Sometimes it's good, other times it's the worst thing that you ever seen. So just imagine when films come out that are based upon reality and they hit you in the face. And such a movie hit us like that in 1995 when a film director named Larry Clark and a bunch of youngsters got together and made the coming-of-age movie, Kids. When Kids was released in the movies on July 28, 1995, to nobody's surprise, it was hit with mixed reviews and hella outrage from both parents and activists. Why? Well, let's break it down. So the story starts off where one of the main characters, Telly, is making out with a 12-year-old girl who he's trying to convince to have sex with him. He eventually does, which is followed by a voiceover of why he loves virgins.
Virgin, I love them. No diseases, no loose goose pussy, no skank, no nothing, just pure pleasure.
After he's finished, he meets up with his best friend Casper, played by Justin Pierce, and brags about his experience before shoplifting a 40 ounce and joining a group of guy friends. Meanwhile, the same gathering is being done by a group of teenage girls, which includes main characters Ruby and Jenny, played by Rosario Dawson and Chloe Sevigny. Yes, that Chloe Sevigny from This Ish right here, which, believe me, we will be talking about in the future. Each of the group is talking about sexual topics in a different way, mostly contradicting each other, before Ruby and Jenny mentioned that they got recently tested. The testing was mainly on Ruby's behalf because of her many sexual encounters. Jenny just did it at Ruby's request, even though she only had sex once, and that was with Telly. Later on, they go get their results back where, despite her numerous reckless sexual encounters, Ruby test comes back negative. Jenny, however, is not so lucky. She got hit with the 1 in a million lightning bolt as she tested positive for HIV. With this knowledge, Jenny's goal now is to try to get in touch with Telly and tell him before he can infect another girl. Meanwhile, Telly and Casper go to his house where he steals money from his mom.
My girl's got mad flavor.
Hold up. Did he just pull a Giovanna Plowman? The hell's wrong with these people? But anyway, Telly also begins talking about a girl named Darcy who is his next target and conquering her virginity before going to score some drugs and hang out with friends at the park. During this time, Casper accidentally bumps into a guy and it turns into a confrontation, which leads to a cowardly gang up on the guy by Casper and his friends. After the encounter, Telly and some friends go to Darcy's house where they convince her to go swimming with them and to a party later on where he plans to make his next move. Meanwhile, Jenny is still searching for Telly, which leads her to this place called the NASA Club where she encounters this nerdy looking guy named Fidget, who's played by Harmony Korine. He then feeds her a pill which turns out to be a depressant, which kicks in after she finds out what Telly's whereabouts is. Now slowly but surely, she makes it to this party, but she arrives too late as she finds Telly having sex with Darcy. She then goes to a couch and cries herself to sleep. The next morning, Casper wakes up to the party's aftermath where he sees that Telly has scored. He then goes and sits by an unconscious Jenny where sadly, he takes advantage of her, exposing himself unknowingly to the HIV, despite Jenny trying to warn him. The movie ends with another tele voiceover, followed by Casper's famous line.
Jesus Christ, what happened?
And that's Kids. And like how I said earlier, when this film was released in theaters, a lot of it had mixed reviews. While some people called it teensploitation and borderline child porn, a lot of people praised it and seen it as a wake-up call to both parents and kids. And some of the reasons why this film was a very touching one are those as follow. In the beginning, where Telly is having sex with the girl who is played by Sarah Henderson, at the time of the filming, there were rumors that she was only 17 years old, despite Larry Clark stating many a times that she was over 18. Now, I researched this the best that I could, but I could find nothing that proved that she was underage. So therefore, it remains a rumor. Another part were the scenes that depicted gays. The male gays were shunned, while the females were praised, encouraged, even over sexualized. For instance, in that scene where the group sees the gay guy couple walking together hand in hand, it's followed by a ton of gay bashing led by the character Casper. But during the pool scene where the two girls are making out, he says nothing. It depicted a double standard view of the LGBT that some of them just didn't like, as well as parents who do their damnedest to try to shield their kids from the reality of the LGBT community, which leads us to our second reason why this film was touching. Despite the urban depiction of drugs, delinquency, and the lifestyle, the biggest topic was sex. Mainly the consequences of having it prematurely and reckless like these kids were, or even talking about it for that matter. Like in the scenes where it switches from the guy group to the girl group. They talked about sex like it was no big whoop and there was no consequences to it. A scene or two later, boom, one of them gets HIV. And HIV was a huge scary topic back then, because around the early 80s to the mid 90s, it was basically a death sentence, and you got treated like an outcast, which led to a lot of protests led by the LGBT activists, since it was the main community that was mostly hit. But besides that little tidbit, Kids was basically a reminder that no one was immune to the HIV virus, especially straight people like our invincible acting youth. So imagine parents that spend so much time trying to sheer their kids away from stuff instead of sitting down, explaining and teaching them the joys and dangers of life that are depicted in movies such as Kids. They have a problem with stuff like that and they try to censor it or get it shut down, which only makes people want to see it more. And finally, the biggest controversial topic was Casper taking advantage of an unconscious Jenny. Now, this is every woman and parents of a daughter's worst nightmare. Because how many times have we heard stories, well, actual stories, not the fake ones that are done for attention, of females that attended events or parties and they got either drugged or roofied only to find that later on they had been sexually assaulted. There are too many to count. But regardless of what others say, my opinion is basically this. I agree with the critics and the reviewers that looked at the movie Kids and said that this was a wake-up call to parents and kids everywhere. Because this is a movie that parents, they should see at least once, either with or without their kids, and then sit them down and explain what this movie was all about. Because the main reason why this movie was so great is because it depicted reality. Kids like this actually exist to this day. I don't like it, but it's like, what can you do besides make sure that you and yours don't follow down the same path? But in the end, Kids turned out to be a great cult classic that is still enjoyed to this day. The film director Larry Clark went on to make other movies such as Bully and Ken Park. And not only that, the 4 people that you basically see on this t-shirt right now, a little tidbit, this was actually their debut. This was the first movie that they ever starred in, and they went on to make other movies as well, minus Justin Pierce, who tragically passed away. May he rest in peace. But if you ever get the chance, check out Kids 1995. I guarantee you will not be disappointed. But that's gonna wrap up this video right here. This is Dee Wayne basically saying until next time, we's out.